Hello and welcome to today's session on how to get your child to speak your language and still be friends. I have the great privilege and honor to introduce you and welcome Dr. Annick De Houwer to this session. Welcome, Annick.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Annick's pioneering research on bilingual children's language development has been highly influential in the field. In addition to many journal articles and book chapters, she has published 4 books on bilingual children, all of which are on my bookshelf and are frequently consulted. She is the president of the International Association for the Study of Child Language and directs the Harmonious Bilingualism Network. You will find a link to that in Annick's bio. Habitat aims to support and stimulate scientific research into harmonious bilingualism and to make sure the results of that research are widely disseminated amongst families and educators. And I applaud you for that, Annick. Thank you so much and welcome once again. So happy to have you here.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm very happy to be here. And I want to congratulate Rita Rosenbach and all the ambassadors and everybody at Peach for what they're doing, because it's yeah, that's great. And then to have this summit, that's quite an organization. Fantastic. I myself, well, I already got a very nice introduction. I just want to say that I've been studying bilingual children now for, I think, more than 40 years. Yes. Is that true? Yes, it's true. And also the moment that I started studying bilingual children, that's also when I started being asked to talk to parents and to consult with them. Of course, at the very beginning, I wasn't much of a specialist yet, but this did continue. What I'm finding is that the questions that are being asked are pretty much the same as the ones that were asked 40 years ago. And the big difference is now I have a lot of answers because of all the research that has been taking place. And I think that's great. And I also think it's really great that there is so much outreach work that's happening at the moment, and that the outreach work is also looking at the researchers and engaging with the researchers. I think that's the only way to go, really. Okay. So on a personal level, I've lived in many different countries, continents, and I wasn't actually raised bilingually myself, but I was already very much aware of different languages when I was a very young child. And I've raised a bilingual child myself, and I've got 2 grandchildren who are being raised, well, one trilingually, all of them anyway, both of them actually. And I just keep learning about it. And I learn a lot also from the consultations that I've been doing over the years, and also now through HabelNet. Anyway, so here it goes. The title, How to Get Your Child to Speak Your Language and Still Be Friends. Of course, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but not quite, because it can be a little serious. Oh, and now that is, okay, now this will work. And basically the contents of this talk is based on this very new chapter that actually already appeared. So the 22, well, it should be 21, developmental perspectives on parents' use of discourse strategies with bilingual children, that I co-authored with Janice Nakamura from Japan. So the contents of my talk is fully backed up by relevant scientific research. I want to emphasize that. And to me, that's incredibly important, that what I say is not based on my personal opinion. And I can really show people where my ideas come from. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got all these multilingual families, and look at this picture where you see what is a family. A family is not only a couple with a dog, for instance, but also there, the next picture you see on the top there, a family has to do also with relatives, with grandparents on both sides, yes? And people want to be able to communicate, want their children to be able to communicate with their parents, so with the grandparents, basically. Also, you see some families there with 2 children or 3 children even, and people want, of course, that everybody communicates well with each other, right, in the family. The one thing, of course, that's really important is that growing up involves learning to talk, except, of course, in cases where there are problems with audition, but then there are sign languages. That's also a way of talking. So I include that really in talking. But it's really important that children can communicate with all their family members in whatever languages that these family members speak. And here I would like for you to meet Orhan. And Orhan, that's not his real name, but the example is based on my consultations, and Orhan lives in London. And Orhan's mother spoke Turkish to him from birth. And his father always addressed him in English. And so he lives in London, and there, obviously, the major language there outside the home is English. And at age 4, Orhan spoke fluent English and understood Turkish, but did not speak it. So there you see that X in that little picture there. He did not speak it. I should have shown that picture just now, but somehow I couldn't manage, sorry. And what happened is that Orhan's mother, with whom I spoke only fairly recently, she was greatly saddened by this because Orhan cannot communicate with his Turkish grandparents. And that's a real issue. And now, of course, also with the COVID in the past year and a half, there have not been any visits. So also like digital connection with the grandparents, Orhan just leaves the room when his mother starts up the Skyping session with her parents because he knows he cannot talk. And then we have here another example from Leah, a girl that's of course a pseudonym also, and she used to live in Bruges because I met her when I was a PhD student, so I have no idea where she lives now, and I've written about her. And Leah, we meet her up when she's 3, and Leah's mother had spoken Dutch to her from birth, and her father had always addressed her in English. But then at age 3, Leah spoke really fluent Dutch. She understood some English, but in English, she only said yes and no. And this really greatly angered her father. So not like Orhan's mother, who was basically saddened, but her father really claimed and really felt that Leah was rejecting him by rejecting his language. I mean, that's how he interpreted it, that she was rejecting his language and thus also him. Yeah. And in fact, there are really a lot of children who speak only a single language, in spite of hearing 2 or more languages from their parents. And I made a big study of that, bringing together all the big surveys that there are worldwide. And worldwide, this happens not just in one place, it's a very general global phenomenon. And this is very sad because parents usually do not like it when children do not speak their language. And that I've documented also, and there are lots of stories about that. Now, the thing is, there are many reasons why children may not speak a language that a parent speaks to them. And I discuss several of these reasons in my most recent book, which is not, which is quite academic actually, but if you're interested, you can always send me an email and I can just send it to you. So there are many, many reasons, but one very important point is that in order for young children to learn to speak 2 languages, they must actually need to speak them. There must be a need to use them. Now, in a monolingual situation, children have no choice. They have to use that one language in order to communicate verbally, right? But with two languages, there's sometimes there's an option, right? So it's really important that caregivers create a necessity for children to respond in the same language that they are speaking to children at a given time. I want to focus on that, at a given time, and I'll say a little more about that later. So if that necessity within the family is created from early on, so then some kind of habit is established between a particular person, a caregiver, and the child as to what language they're going to be speaking to each other. And if that necessity is created from early on, then the chances are that children will continue to speak whatever language they are addressed in. Although when they get older, there will be some challenges, quite a few of actually. But the thing is how caregivers respond to children's language choice is fundamental. And so language choice, that is really the language your child is speaking and the language you use in a particular conversation. It's not always a conscious choice, but there's always a selection that you have to make. If you can actually speak two languages, you have to always at every point make a choice. Like right now, I'm speaking in English en ik ga nu eventjes naar het Nederlands. So I just switched to Dutch. So I changed my language choice. Of course, now I changed back to English because most of you wouldn't understand, right? But I have these other options, these other languages in my repertoire. So what's important is how you respond to children's language choice. And the normal expectation is that your child responds in the same language that you are speaking to her or to him. Because that's what you would expect too when you're speaking to adults, other adults. Well, people adjust to each other in the kind of language that they use. They accommodate to each other. Now, so another normal expectation is that your child will start talking to you in the language you usually speak to him or her. But very young children, and this happens a lot, very young children may say a word to you in a language you understand, but you're not speaking with your child at that time. I want to stop right here, actually. I might repeat it later, but I'm not here really advising or saying you should use the one person, one language situation. You could be speaking two languages to your child, but you could do this, and probably should, in different circumstances. For instance, at dinner time, you speak Portuguese with your child, but at bedtime, you speak German with your child, for instance. And within that time, dinner time, when you're going to be using Portuguese, for instance, because your husband is there and he speaks Portuguese, for instance, that could be one reason, yes. Then at that point, you expect the child to also speak Portuguese. Yes, doesn't matter if occasionally there's a German word in there, but then when you're alone with the child at bedtime, that's when you expect the child to speak German and not Portuguese. So you can the point is to try and get the child to respond in the same language at a particular time within a particular conversation and a context. The thing is, what do you do if your child says a word to you in a language you understand, but are not speaking with your child at that time? What do you do? Well, basically, you could do nothing. And you could ignore your child's unexpected language choice. And indeed, you may not notice it. You may not have even noticed it, because if you are bilingual yourself, you might have understood, right? But if you do nothing and ignore it, and this will most certainly lead to your child not speaking your language if that language is not the societal language. But if this is what you want, so you don't really mind if your child does not speak your language, that's no problem. That is, again, your choice, your decision, basically, yes. But I think that most of the people who are watching and listening now, most of you will want your child to speak your language, if only so that the child can speak and talk to all the relatives, yes? So this is what you could do to coax a child into speaking the language you are speaking to them in a particular conversation. First thing you have to do is you have to sort of stop the conversation in its tracks. So if your child is not speaking the language that you are speaking to the child at a particular time, you must do something. You're not going to let this go. You've got to, so this requires an awareness and an attention to whatever language the child is using. And that doesn't come easily. And also when children are very young, I know that parents are just so happy that their child is actually saying words that they don't really care. They don't really mind in what language they're speaking. Well, if you're interested in your child eventually really speaking your language, you should mind, really. You should do something. You should pay attention to that. So you have to sort of stop the conversation in its tracks. And then what do? You kind of stop the conversation. You could ask in your language what the child means. So you could ask, what? What did you say? Huh? And this is quite normal. People who just live monolingual lives, they do this all the time. You do this also in regular conversation. People ask clarification questions. That's what that's called, a clarification question. You didn't quite understand, even though you know that language, you missed it, you didn't hear it audibly, you weren't paying attention, whatever. So it's not necessarily the case that you are pretending not to understand, which is, often said by people in a very negative way. It's completely normal in conversation to ask for a clarification, yes. And if you do this, even already with a young child, chances are in a bilingual setting that your child will respond by changing to the language you are speaking with them, even if your child is just saying single words. But obviously, very often, very young children don't have all the words in both languages yet. They just don't know them yet, right? And that's also very important then that you realize this. But most parents know what words their very young children actually understand and are able to say. There are huge studies based just on that knowledge that parents have. So in a particular situation, if your child is referring to a toy in Portuguese, but you're speaking German with them right then and there, well, and you know that you've not taught the child the word they need in German, well, then this is your opportunity to teach your child that word in German for what the child just named in Portuguese. So this is another strategy you could use. You could translate what you think your child said into your language. And you could ask them if this is what they meant. Again, because there it says, because often children don't have the words in your language yet when they're very young. And then many children will say yes in your language, and they will repeat what you said in your language. Because children are very eager to just to learn words, and that's what they're doing in their second year of life. They just have an explosion of words, yeah. Just today, earlier, actually, I had consulted with somebody, a German-speaking grandmother who was not very happy that that her granddaughter, who's being raised here in the French-speaking part of Belgium, that she just speaks French. So she started working with this also. And now she's at the point where the 3-year-old grandchild, well, is not completely speaking French, speaking German to her yet, but where she would start translating herself, the child, and basically knowing that her grandmother speaks German, and the child is kind of starting to be aware that there's some things that maybe the grandmother wouldn't know in French. So she would even start to translate words that the grandmother says in German into French, showing understanding, which is already quite good. Anyway, so many children, when you then translate what they're saying and check with them whether that's what they meant, many children will say yes and repeat what you said in your language, but there will be some who will just say yes and not repeat the word that you gave them. So you could go also, you can then insist a little bit if you like, it depends. The one thing you could also do is you could just translate what you think your child said into your language without asking for confirmation from the child. However, the effect of this is unclear. You know, lots of studies have looked at that, and it's not very clear that that has any positive effect. The really positive effects come from these first two strategies. So asking, what did you say? Huh? That is the best, actually. And then translating and checking. So asking for confirmation. That's also something that's part of regular talking. You know, we often think we understood something, and then we say, oh, well, is this what you meant? Yeah, but it's just the differences here that we're here dealing with two different languages. Okay, now here are some more tips. For children between the ages of 2 and 4, you can get a hand puppet that can only speak one language. You know, the hand puppet comes from Brazil, and we're in Germany. And of course, you know, if you want to talk to the hand puppet, you got to speak Portuguese, obviously, because, you know, that hand puppet doesn't know any German. So you speak through the hand puppet for the child. And this, I've advised this to so many parents, and then I got, you know, it's just wonderful. After a week or 10 days, I get these emails back. Oh, for the very first time, my child spoke my language because I got this interesting hand puppet, and they talk to the hand puppet. And of course, it's the parent who speaks through the hand puppet, obviously, yes. So the hand puppet only understands one language, yeah. Also, you can tell children, and in fact, this German grandmother that I just mentioned, I told her to try that one, and that worked like a charm with her 2.5-year-old granddaughter. Tell children that right now, your head is full of only German or English or Polish or whatever words, and you do not have space for words from another language. So you can tell them that when they're a little older, maybe not when they're just 2 years old, but 2.5, and it depends on the child. But then when children get a little older and start to attend preschool, what is really important is make sure to be free and at home. When they come home, when they start to attend preschool and school, which is usually a full day, in a language that is the societal language and not the language you're using with your child, yeah, make sure to be free. So take a day off, or a week maybe, for the first week of school, if that's at all possible. Try to be there when they come home, so you can help them find the words in your language to talk about preschool. Let them first talk about it in the school language, but then once they've settled down, they've had their snack, you know, then you can talk about it like oh yeah, and how was that? And coax them back into speaking the language they normally do speak with you, the non-societal language. Now, for primary school children who may start to be reluctant to speak your language, now younger children can also already show reluctance, true, especially if you haven't installed this habit with them yet. But anyway, in primary school children, even if you previously installed this habit of using a particular language with you in particular situations, they may start to be really reluctant. Well, if they're a little older, like 6, 7, 8, you can have a heart-to-heart conversation with them. You can really be quite open about it. Speak with them about why, for you, it's important that they speak your language. And this will often do it, but don't make it into a battleground. That's the one thing you should not do. So, because this is really what you want is harmonious relationships in a 3-generation perspective through language. And with this, I look forward to your questions and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That was wonderful. A very good presentation. Many great ideas on how to make your children speak your language. Fantastic. We have 2 questions so far. I think everybody has just been attentively listening to your talk. So we haven't had that many questions, but we have from Mel, I presume. Mel. She mentions that she's had an experience with the translation technique. And after a few times, the child felt that she was being corrected and started to show resistance towards translation. What should you do in that case?
Well, I would like to know though how old this child was. Excuse me, how old the child was when this was starting to happen.
Yes,
because
Mel,
that matters.
Yes, that absolutely. So Mel, can you just put in the chat? Child was 2, apparently.
2 years of age, and already resisting that. Well, terrible twos, I guess. Yes. It's difficult because we know, yes, toddlers can be very difficult and resist pretty much anything. I think that then in that case, it's very important to introduce the hand puppet. And with the hand puppet, things will, because you're adding a 3rd person into the conversation, basically, through the hand puppet. And a 2-year-old will accept that. And obviously, you're going to, choose a hand puppet that you think your child will be interested in. And this will also diffuse the tension a little bit, and it will probably work. So try that hand puppet idea. Yeah, no, I've heard about that, and also about already 2.5-year-olds when they see that the Skype session with the grandparents is being started up, they don't want to be in the room because they don't want to be brought there and be forced to interact and feel that they can't and feel a little strange.
Yeah, so, I think on those kind of, we need to put ourselves in the children's shoes as well, and make those sessions as interesting as possible for the children, to make them pull towards them. So, yeah. So I think that's important. And Mel has got some other questions. So do you recommend using music to attract a child to the language?
Music, you mean like in with songs? Well, I don't think how music, music, you probably mean songs, right?
Yeah.
Not just music.
Yes.
But songs, well, using songs definitely will, in both languages, will definitely support children's language development, but typically we don't really communicate in a conversation through music. I mean, you can sing a song together, which is a very positive, which creates a positive sentiment, a positive feeling. So in that sense, that's very nice. But a song is a song. A song is not although we use words, it's not the same as talking. So, but obviously, if you think that might help, yes. But I cannot advise for or against it based on any empirical research, because as far as I know, nobody's has looked at that. Right.
And I think if you can make, for example, if you have songs where you can take turns, so
Yeah.
that can, I mean, that just common sense explain that child would be prepared to use the language in a song with you. So it can't be bad. Can't be bad.
Can't be bad. I want to stress one thing, that these strategies of asking what, you obviously are not going to do that when there is an emergency. Yeah. When your child is obviously upset about something, then obviously that is not the time to focus on language choice, right?
Yeah.
You have to, it has to be in a normal situation, like, just like it would be also, you socialize your child, you train your child into, you teach them, you get them to do something through language, just as like when your child at age 2 says cookie, well, no cookie will be forthcoming in many households unless the child says, cookie, please, mommy. It's exactly that kind of thing. It's exactly at that level. Right.
Absolutely. Maybe, Annick, if you stop sharing, then we can see you better. So you're not just a small window there.
All right. Okay.
Thank you so much. So the next question comes from Aisha. How should a parent respond, and what should they do when the child, usually below 5, doesn't want the parent to speak the other language? They insist that the parent should speak the main language, so the societal language instead.
Well, then the question, to what extent you're going to be ruled by a small child. I'm sorry to say it like that, but children can and are absolutely, all children at all ages, they are privy to their own opinions, yes? But if you've got a child who's already talking about that, then that's probably a very smart child. And that child can be sat down for a very important, tender, but clear heart-to-heart conversation about language and the importance of language. I think that's what you should do in such a situation. I know that children already at age 4, many children can already be very aware of the languages they use. I had a conversation with my trilingually raised granddaughter at age 4, where she very clearly said that her preferred language is English, but she doesn't know it so well yet. And her best language is French, but she doesn't like it as well as English. And then Dutch, well, she's okay with Dutch, but she can barely talk Dutch. So she doesn't want to make mistakes. So that's why she prefers to use English with me, so that she doesn't make a fool of herself when she speaks Dutch. Now, that's fair.
Oh, bless her. Well, yeah, they're very wise from a young person. Yeah. Then next question we have from Marissa. What would you say to parents who never really set up the stage for their children to need to speak back in a minority language, and now they feel it's too difficult to do so? These children are 8 and 12.
Yeah. Well, this is unfortunately, look, first of all, it's never too late to learn another language. We can learn other languages until we are very old, as long as our brains work properly. Yeah. So, but to start to change language patterns within the family when children are 8, 12 years of age, that is very late, and it's probably not going to happen, because language is linked with emotion, and a relationship is forged through language. And if already habits have been set up for so long in the child's life within a particular pattern and a particular language, then trying to change that is just going to be very strange for the child, and that, and also for the parent, I would imagine. So the thing is to create particular patterns of use. That is so important in the very first years of life, because these are foundational for the rest of family life and for the rest of the child's development. And that's not only the case for language, but for so many other things.
Yes, thank you. Rebecca's question, we'll see how many we can still manage. We have about 8 minutes left before of this session. Rebecca says, the minimal grasp is one of the best strategies, but some parents don't want to use it because they think it is very direct, and sometimes the children get frustrated because they don't have the vocabulary and grammar. Do you have some ideas how they can manage that with older children?
Oh, okay. So you're mentioning the minimal grasp with the huh and the what did you say? What do you mean? Yeah, that's the minimal grasp. Yes, exactly. That is Liz Lanza's term, and she first came up with this in the late 80s, actually. How you would do that with older children in terms of the lack of vocabulary is to then use the expressed guess strategy. So that's the next one. So that is translating the word that the child first used into the language that you're speaking with the child, and checking, is that what you meant? And so that's then probably a better way. In terms of grammar, I think, basically it's about offering children the lexical tools to express themselves. The grammar, well, that's going to have to come along with the lexis, with the words and the vocabulary, and that is really more supported by the fact that you speak a lot with the child in a particular language, so that there's other factors, obviously, that play a role in whether your child is going to be able to speak a particular language. So you're going to have to speak in a particular language a lot. Everybody has to talk to children a lot in all kinds of languages, yes? And also give the child, obviously, the chance to practice speaking a language. So that's why it's so important at a very young age to give the child the lexical tools that they need, so the words around which they can build their sentences. If they have the words, they'll be able to build the sentences as long as you've been speaking a lot to them. They will just use the correct grammar. It just happens, very, yeah, right. But of course, if they've never, and you will give them obviously the opportunity to practice the language that you want them to speak at a particular time. So the grammar will come along.
Fantastic, thank you. Elena speaks about what if there's a sad parent, or I'd like to go back, if one is sad and the other one is angry. I presume the idea is that one is kind of in a positive mood, the other one is in a negative mood, and does the type of emotional response have an impact on the child's choice of language? I think that will have, I think that's quite, you can put that on even in a monolingual situation. Who would the child want to speak to, with the happy parent or with the angry parent? So I think, yes, it will have an impact. Next question is from Aisha. How can a parent help their child learn a language that they are not fluent in if the language is taught at school and it isn't effective enough? And what could they do?
You mean like a foreign language?
Well, I think that's the question here. Yes.
If your child is being taught at school a foreign language, so a language that you don't know yourself either?
No, I presume there should be at least a little bit of knowledge with the parent, because otherwise they can't support the child in that language, can they? So
Well, but I think that is a topic that doesn't belong here to this normal day-to-day family, bilingual family communication. I think that's a very separate topic. I'd be happy to talk about it, but in another forum, perhaps.
Yeah, perfect. So from Laura, excited to hear that connection for respectful, harmonious bilingualism. In the workshops she shares with parents, they analyze that the type of response from us, the parents, the level of demand is connected to the moment and the situation. For example, when a child is sick or when we are in front of his friend, etc., it varies the way we as parents rephrase their sentence or guide their communication.
Yes, of
course.
We
could just agree with that.
Absolutely. Yes, but of course, in front of their friend. So there are children, once you've created a particular pattern of language use with your child, especially in a one parent, one language setting, then your child may, overdo it and only want to speak one particular language with you in any situation. Yes. And that, and you personally might find that a bit embarrassing sometimes because bystanders may not understand your language. So this may happen, and that's difficult. You could also, when the child is a little older, you could talk to the child about it and say, well, I feel a bit embarrassed. You're speaking German to me when your English speaking friend is there, and I feel like, maybe your friend will feel excluded from our conversation. Maybe you could talk to, if you feel embarrassed about that. Yes. You could discuss it with a somewhat older child. That's fine. It's always negotiations, but it's about respect and mutual respect and listening to each other. Definitely. Yeah.
Eleftheria says how to handle the situation when a parent speaks the societal language, but actually has a different mother tongue. And the child sees the parent communicating in the societal language. Will that discourage the child from speaking the parent's mother language, knowing he can communicate the easy way with the parent? I think we can answer that with a simple yes. If the parent doesn't use their native language, then the child won't either.
That's very clear.
That's very clear, yes.
Yeah.
Someone asked is there a kind of time when you can start using hand puppets?
Yeah, between 2 and 4. So, and you would introduce that technique only if you have a child who's not really speaking your language much. If your child is speaking your language all the time to you, there's nothing particularly special that you would have to do. But I don't think that this hand puppet idea works with children who are older than 4 because they'll think it's stupid.
It needs to be interesting. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we won't have time for the rest of the questions, but keep your questions, maybe put them in the chat in the lobby, and we'll try all answer. If Annick, if you can still be with us, you're welcome. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was fantastic. We have recorded it, and we will make that available to everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.